Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 119, I chat with Bob Heil about microphones, USB, pipe organs, speakers, and all things audio. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded July 9th, 2012. Episode 119, Heil Nation. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly. All streamed directly to you, saving you time, money, and hassle. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, online editor of HomeTheater.com. This week's guest geek is none other than Bob Heil, host of Ham Nation right here on the TWiT network, and the founder and CEO of Heil Sound and general audio raconteur. Hey, Bob, welcome back to the show.
Hey, good to be here, and it's nice to see you and spend some hours with your great friends. You have a lot of friends, you know. That's
I do have a lot of friends, and a lot of home theater geeks tuning in right now, and those of you who are tuned in live, in fact, to live.twit.tv or signed into the chat room at irc.twit.tv can post questions for Bob, and I'll pass along as many as I can. Now, Bob, first of all, I want to tell you how much I'm enjoying using the PR40 microphone, which has become a standard at TWiT. Everybody seems to be using it, and now that I've come to set up my new podcast studio here at my house, I get to use one too, and I'm just thrilled. Thank you so much.
Well, we appreciate that. It's been a real fun thing putting that together. It all started with one of my good friends, Joe Walsh of the Eagles. Joe and I've been ham radio buddies for 45 years, and
that's right.
Yeah, WB6ACU. And he operates mostly on AM. That's kind of goes along with this new CD called Analog Man.
Now, are there different? Can you operate ham on AM or FM?
Oh, that big transmitter that Leo has in the back of the studio there in his ham radio studio, that big Collins, that was a broadcast transmitter. And that's what Joe does. He finds these big old broadcast transmitters, and then he takes them, rebuilds them, and changes the frequency to 75 meters or 160 meters, and we use them on the amateur radio band. Absolutely, it's legal, and it just sounds so pretty. A lot of guys call it angel music for AM, because the audio is so much better than sideband because the bandwidth is wider. But anyway, Joe asked me to build him a better microphone, and I hadn't looked back. We'd built hundreds of thousands of headsets and microphones for the ham radio industry since about 1980, and came up with this, and it's really kind of fun because what's happened is that we have had a number of guys and girls that they just got really sad because none of the microphones today were of new technology. Most of them are 40, 50 years old, and Joe says, let's do something new. So we did. His ears, my soldering iron, and boy, we've come up with some very neat things, as you've discovered there in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. So what's new about the PR40? I mean, I was also under the impression that microphones hadn't changed much in 50 years or more. It's a little diaphragm that vibrates under the influence of sound waves hitting it, and that gets translated into an electrical signal, and down it goes the wire, and off into the ether, as it were. What's new about the PR40? What did you come up with that was new and different?
Bigger diaphragms. Some of our diaphragms in the PR30 is 1.5 inches. They're huge. And it's one of those things that a lot of the manufacturers tried it some time ago, years ago, but it never worked well for them because they couldn't tame it. It was so big and it would just flop around. It had no transient response. It didn't have a lot of dynamic range. But it was Joe and I, two crazy hams, that figured out how to tame that beast and did some very interesting things with phasing that causes it to get a beautiful 35 to 40 dB of rear rejection. And it's a great testament there in the studio at TWiT. You know, that's a very open studio.
Oh,
and, you put a condenser mic or any of these cheap dynamics in there and you're going to hear the entire room. Well, no, it shouldn't be done that way. And we figured out, believe it or not, I applied antenna theory. I'm an antenna nut. I just love antennas.
Right.
And we figured out taking how an antenna works. If I can point it to you, I'm not going to hear New York from the Midwest. If I pointed to New York, I'm not going to hear you. All because of phasing. And we applied some of that to the microphone, and guess what happens? We get incredible rejection. And so that's what we were after, was being able to do something that no one else has ever done. And it's really been fun because it's changed the dynamics. It's kind of a play on word, but it's changed the dynamics of it. Of the entertainment group. So many, hundreds of them are now using our products on stage, and it's helping them really make better productions, better music, reproducing instruments, richer, natural. And that's what I'm after. I want them to be more natural, and in some cases that's not true, but now it is.
Now, does this technique that you have about phasing have anything to do with, I was reading your, believe it or not, your Wikipedia entry, which you've got quite an extensive one, actually. And it talks about your work with The Who and Quadrophenia and coming up with, or it might have been the Grateful Dead, I forget which, but you came up with a microphone setup that basically rejected feedback and allowed you to crank the sound system way up. Does this have anything to do with that?
Has everything to do with that. Here, I just changed microphones. You're copying me okay, I would hope.
Looks okay to me. Sounds okay to me.
This is the PR40. But watch what happens. You know, what's really cool about it is we figured out how to get a nice omni pattern. That's another thing that a lot of the broadcasters love. You can move around on it, and you don't have to just sit right here like all the others. But here's where the big thing comes into. And for you that are listening on the podcast, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn this microphone totally around and talk in the back of it, and you will hear very little to nothing. And this is that great rejection because of the understanding of phasing that a couple of ham radio operators had. When I talk in the back, you hear nothing. It's gone. And
wow. Very little.
I'll do that again. I'm going to go all the way down, and I'll just take it very slowly now, and it just goes away. And it's a remarkable thing to be able to do that in today's world, where we have a lot of levels on these stages and in recording studios too. So we're very happy to bring this new technology to the marketplace. It's been needed for a long time.
Yeah. Now, another of your hallmarks in terms of microphones is that you make only dynamic mics, not condensers. And I'd love to hear about your philosophy of that. First of all, explain to us, if you would, the difference between the two. Those are two of the primary types of mics that people use, condenser and dynamic. If you would give us a quick thumbnail description of what's different about them, and then why you have decided to focus only on dynamics.
Well, the situation with the condensers is they're an active microphone. They have a transistor, some kind of active component. Some of them is stupid enough have tubes in them. Don't get me started.
But they need power. Being active, they actually need power.
You got to power them with phantom power. That's a big problem. But the thing about them is they have way too much gain. If I had a condenser on in here, you'd hear everything with about 50 feet of me. And what I always hated when I was out in the early days on the road with all these great bands, The Who and Jimi Hendrix and, of course, Joe Walsh and Humble Pie, the Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin. I mean, it was dozens of them. In the late 60s, early 70s, we were the guys doing their audio. And I hated it because we'd put up a microphone and they'd bring these overheads of condensers. Well, I would hear more guitar than I would cymbal because it was so overly sensitive. And so I always knew there was a better way. And that was Joe's desire. He said, we've got to get rid of all this background noise. Well, that background noise came from microphones that didn't have proper rejection. And, of course, the condenser's the number one culprit because it's too sensitive. Mm. But nobody has built a dynamic that had the same beautiful response and really worked better than a condenser. And so that was the goal for us to do. And I think we've pretty much done that. And I just got a CD. I meant to bring it home to you. I just got it from John Pizzarelli. You know, he's a great jazz guitarist. And he just put out a brand new CD. Every microphone in the studio was our dynamic. And it is gorgeous. It sounds so good because it's so defined. Every instrument, you can almost pick them out with a decent system. As you move around, you can hear each one of the instruments because they're not bleeding over into each of the other. That is why I have never liked the performance of any condenser. And it's really kind of a strange deal. And now, gosh, they got all these little cheap things and they stick them in funny-looking things and try to hoodwink the public that these are really cool. They might be cool looking, but they don't perform. They don't perform.
Now, it's true that the purpose of a microphone is to sound good, and it sort of almost doesn't matter what it looks like. Right. But you've made some pretty cool-looking mics.
I should have hooked this up earlier. This is one we built for ZZ Top. I actually built it for Joe. Joe said to me, he said, you need to build a microphone that looks like the front end of a 48 Pontiac. So I did. This microphone has RPR20 in it. And there's a lot of microphones that look nice, but they don't sound very good. Well, there's many people using this microphone for even recording. That's how good it is. And it's a fun thing. And I also... That
thing lights up, right?
I have a use for phantom power.
Oh, yeah. It's lighting that thing up, right?
Yeah.
You finally found a use for phantom power. By the way, for those who don't know, phantom power is supplied by the mixer or the preamp, whatever you plug your microphone into. It actually sends a DC voltage back to the microphone, typically 48 volts DC. And that's what condenser mics need, either that or a battery or some sort of power source in them in order to operate. Whereas a dynamic microphone has a permanent magnet inside and does not require any power at all, which makes it a lot more convenient. You don't need phantom power. If the battery wears out, then you're stuck. But with a dynamic, you don't need that at all. And Bob clearly has solved the problems or improved the quality, I should say, of dynamics to the point where condensers were typically, for a long time, considered sort of the better microphone. That's what was used in the studios. But they have these problems that Bob's been talking about. And so having a dynamic with the same quality characteristics but without the inherent problems is really a big step forward. And I applaud you for that, Bob.
Well, we're very honored and blessed to be able to bring this to the public. They've gone just over the top. Clint Eastwood uses the very microphone you're talking in, the PR40. They use several of those to record things like cannons and all of the big explosions in Flags of Our Fathers and that whole series of movies they made. And there's a lot of movie makers that are discovering the PR40 now for other sources. And up until now, they'd put a condenser out there, and they were so sensitive, some of them would actually destroy the diaphragm because of the tremendous air pressure of a cannon or a tank going off or whatever. And these things will take. Yeah, these things will take 150 dB SPL and laugh at your sound pressure level.
And 150 is not something you would want to ever be exposed to. That's for darn sure.
No. We have a pair of these mounted in Danny Carey, who is the drummer for Tool, probably one of the loudest bands I've ever encountered. They are
What's the name of the band again? Sorry?
Tool.
Tool?
It's Tool. Big metal band, but oh man, they do some very pretty things, and they use almost all of our microphones. And we have a pair of these on the shock mount, mounted internally in the kick drums. He's got two of them, and they've got over 1 million miles on them. And as he travels around, he just plugged the connector in the side of the drum. They don't have to mount it at all, and it's internal. You can imagine what the SPL is inside that kick drum.
Oh man! Well, that brings up another question that I wanted to ask you. You worked with the Dead, you worked with the Who, you worked with all these great groups that always looked to make the sound as loud as possible. And we'll say clean as well, not distorted. Maybe in the early days that was more of a problem, but I'm sure you worked on that problem. But I'm very concerned about sound pressure levels that people are being exposed to at these concerts, especially youngsters. And also putting earbuds in their ears and cranking up their iPods and such. But talking about live concerts, people are on their way to hearing damage later in life. It's a delayed thing. And I wonder how you've reconciled going louder and louder and louder with that concern.
Well, if I was a young student in high school right now, I'd get in, and I'm serious about this, I would get into the field of audiology, because you are exactly right. The kids today are leading themselves down a horrible path in that they're just going to they are, many of them, going to destroy their ears, their hearing. How I did it, I was extremely fortunate. In my early days, a fellow that was a shooter, rifles and pistols and guns on a gun range, gave me some ear valves. And I had never seen or heard of them, and I haven't heard a lot of them now, but they were a little aluminum cylinder that actually had a diaphragm in it, and it would go in your ear. You could hear people whisper right on up to 90 dB, but at 90 dB, that diaphragm said, that's it, and it never really would allow any of the pressure from over 90 dB to enter your ears. That's how I saved my hearing. I had to. My whole thing is, and I still do, is I'm a pipe organist. I'm a theater organist. I still play concerts. In fact, when we finish this, I'm going in there for about an hour to work on some new things that I'm working on. I have a very large 3-manual 24 rank. I'm sitting here looking at it actually in the next room. And I cannot in any way lose my hearing. It's my livelihood. And
well, as a musician and a microphone designer, that's really true.
Yeah, and I've been so fortunate that I have these ear valves. And there's a lot of things you can do today. People actually make, as you probably know, that they'll take a mold of your ear and they'll make you the right kind of valve to fit in your ears. And then they do it also with headphones today. But the problem with headphones is everybody wants to crank them up so loud, and boy, they're about a minuscule right from the eardrum, and it's very, very bad. And I don't know where this is all going, but it's
something I try to promote as often as I can, an awareness of the damage that can be done to your hearing. I do have a pair of those custom earplugs that you mentioned. Went to an audiologist. he squirted this goo into my ears, and it set up and hardened, and he pulled it out and sent it away and came back with these custom molded earplugs that fit into my ears and only my ears. But I wear them at movies and concerts and any place where there's high SPLs because I want to protect the hearing I have left. I, unlike you, when I was young, when I was in college, I played in a variety of rock bands. And I didn't protect my hearing, and I regret that I didn't. And I still have reasonably good hearing. I mean, age-related hearing loss is inevitable, but I do protect what I have left very carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have to do that. And it's not I have one guy one time, I'm not going to wear those sissy things. They're not sissy things. No. When you can't hear, we'll talk about what's sissy and what's not.
Damn straight. Listen, I got a couple questions in the chat room for you. Beatmaster asks, he says, Heil Sound does, like many companies, go from stage recording hardware to headsets to USB preamps. And I was going to mention that too. Can you comment on that trend?
Well, it's only because I'm a ham. You are sitting in my lab. I have all of this stuff. You're only seeing about a third of it behind me. But I'm constantly experimenting and playing. And I come up with something just like I did for Joe. I built Joe one microphone. In fact, here it is right there. That was the microphone. I built him what we call the Goldline Pro. And it was a takeoff on one of our ham radio microphones. And I built it for Joe. Well, then I started experimenting myself and going, wait a minute. This thing is incredibly good. Let's see, I'll show you another thing here. As you know, I really get prepared for all this kind of stuff because there's so much to talk about. We have a ham radio microphone. It's actually made for dual element, made for different types of sound. This one can be very wide band, or we can make it real narrow band for cutting through noise. See, that's the whole deal, is when we want to put our signal through a whole bunch of noise and stuff, then you have to have microphones to do that. But we didn't. We built this for Joe. Well, then I started experimenting. I'm going, wait a minute. This thing's really good, and we'll do other things. The USB thing, a lot of my ham buddies, the amateur radio community is really beginning to use a lot of computers. And one of the big problems is putting a microphone into a computer and making it sound good. It's a very big problem. Oh, I know. I'll go buy one of them there USB mics. And it sounds terrible. Well, there again, I'm going, we can do this better. So I start experimenting, and I came up with something. I'm an equalization freak only because we need to balance audio. We can't just stick it in something and say, that's it. You have to balance whatever the source is. Well, none of these little things you see out there today have equalization. Right now, we have a patent pending on this, Scott. I'm very excited about this because now we have a 2-band shelving equalizer in here, and we can increase the bass, we can roll off the bass, we can increase the treble, roll off the treble. How wonderful! For not very much money, you got yourself a whole channel of a mixer in your hand, and that's how I come up with these things, just experimenting. Headphones, we build about 100,000 a year since 1980. See, a lot of people don't know that side of Heil Sound. And I've had so many people, most of them are CW, Morse code operators, saying, why don't you build headphones without a microphone? And most of our microphones we built for ham radio have always been with a microphone on it for communication.
The headphones with the microphone, yeah.
Yeah, but for communications. I mean, it's a horrible sounding thing as far as quality because we're adhering to only that 3kC that the Federal Communications Commission gives a ham to use. So here we are getting all these things together and playing with them, and then I'm going, wait a minute. And then other guys say, hey, build that for me. That answers the question to the chat room. That's how we do all these things. No is not in my vocabulary, and I just have so much fun bringing all this new stuff, and that's where it all happens.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about the ProSet 3 headphones, which you and I are both wearing, which is, again, another new development from Heil Sound, where you've had these headphones intended for hams and so on, but these, I think, are more intended for music, for higher fidelity. Am I wrong?
Yep. Well, again, that came from a lot of the front of the house engineers. Bob Workman for Charlie Daniels, Andy Ebert. Andy is just all over the place. He does a lot of stuff, Stone Temple Pilots, and he's a wonderful, wonderful engineer, front of the house engineer and monitor engineer, and on and on and on. These engineers that we work with, they've asked me for a long time, why don't you just build us a headphone so we can monitor the board better? They don't want a microphone on it. And there's a lot of them out there. I don't know what the answer is or how to state it. They just don't sound good to me. So we did that and pass them around to all these guys. I'm, again, extremely blessed to have these great engineers as beta testers. They love to take things out and tear it up. And tell me how,
right.
Hey, it did work or it didn't work. And that's how we come to this. And we have, because of all these many, many headsets and products we've built over the years in the ham radio market, I have parts made in all over the world. Right now, the best place to build diaphragms is in Malaysia. We have parts made in the UK. I'm very happy that Japan's coming back. They have some of the best tooling. And so we sit here and do all this crazy stuff, and we get pieces and parts from all these different companies. And I have a broker that finds all these places that are the parts that I need from different places. We bring it into here, right here where you're looking on this bench. I assemble it. I get to test it, and then we can take it out to our beta test guys, and that's how products are done here. Yes, not the normal way, but they're not normal products.
Well, you've answered Lawn Dog's question, which is, do you have a company that actually makes custom microphones and so on, or do you just buy them off the shelf and cherry pick them?
No. I design every piece of them, and we buy the different pieces and parts from different companies. I know where to get the best grills. I know where to get the best connectors and the wiring. I know where to get all the various pieces we need, as well as the diaphragms and, of course, the magnet structures. And those are all shipped into our Illinois plant. We assemble them. And one thing I do, and I'm very, very happy to tell you, we have never let up on this from the very first day, 1966, that this company started. We test every product. And I don't mean just putting it on a scope, because that's what most of them, most of them will grab about 1 out of 50. We don't do that. Yeah, it's
wow.
Sickening.
See, I used to be a QC engineer myself. In my early working days, I did quality control. And we only had to test, as you say, 1 out of 50, 1 out of 100 in a batch.
Not us.
Yeah, you test every single one. That's amazing.
Every cable, every adapter, everything we build, that has to go through a test. On microphones, we look at them as the diaphragms are made, look at them on the scopes. We know what happens there. But I want to hear it. And we have a pair of 4408 JBLs with a Crown amp driving it and a little preamplifier. Is it the best thing in the world? Probably not, but it's very flat. And I've used it for, oh my gosh, maybe 30 years, ever since the 4408 was brought out by JBL. And I know how it sounds. And all of our people in the plant that do this, we know how it sounds. And if there's something strange, we'll know it. Then it gets tossed off the line. I get to go in and check it, or Steve or Jerry or Donna. There's a number of us that can go find out what's going on. But I am not one of those that will adhere to this, let's try every 100. It's going to be every one. because I don't want anybody to get a DOA product from us. And if they do, we want to know why or what it is. And usually if we have it's so rare, but when we do, there's something else going on.
Now, am I correct that you actually assemble? You have these parts that you bring in from different companies around the world, but you actually assemble all your products at your facility in the United States.
Yep,
which is another rarity these days, for which you are to be commended, I would say.
Well, I'm just a little old kid from Marissa, Illinois. That's where I grew up, a town of 2,000 people, 50 miles from southwest of St. Louis in the coal fields of Peabody Coal. And now we're 35 miles north of there. We're just across the river from St. Louis, about 12 miles, and Fairview Heights, Illinois. And that's where we do all this. And I'm very, very happy to have all these people. Some of the guys and gals have been with me for 18, 19 years, and we just love what we do. It's a big family, and it's a fun place to do things. And again, we absolutely have to have that quality control, and nothing gets by Donna, nothing gets by Jerry Lynch, and absolutely nothing gets by Steven. So, and these are just a few of them, but they are the leaders of the pack. And of course, Sarah, my wife, she's the president. She runs this company. She's very brilliant and a credible business lady. I'm not. She just tells me, you get in there and invent stuff, I'll take care of the rest. So, that's what we do.
A partnership made in heaven, it sounds like to me.
It is. Yeah, fun stuff.
That's great. That's great. Well, I got some other questions in the chat room and other things I want to ask you about myself. But before we do, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, which is Netflix. Of course, most of you who are listening to this podcast or watching the video know very well that Netflix provides thousands of TV episodes and movies that can be streamed directly to your PC, to your television, using just about any device, any consumer electronics device available today, directly from the TV, on the Blu-ray player, gaming consoles, dedicated boxes like Boxee or Roku, smartphones, tablets, your computer. Just about anything these days will stream Netflix directly to your TV, saving you time, money, and hassle. You can even start watching on one device and finish on another. It's totally up to you. Very convenient and very low cost, just $8 a month for unlimited streaming, as much as you can possibly consume. Now, for TWiT listeners, there's a special free 30-day trial that you can get by going to netflix.com/twit. Be sure to use that URL when signing up for your 30-day free trial of Netflix. That's netflix.com/twit. And we thank Netflix very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks and the entire TWiT network. Now, Bob, Web2157 in the chat room has asked one of the questions that I was going to ask you, which is, now that we've got these lovely headphones, any thought to designing speakers? Have you ever designed speakers before?
Oh, absolutely. By the way, I'm on a different microphone. We'll talk about this later. This is a microphone designed by an FOH engineer that came to me. Of course, we built hundreds and hundreds of speakers a year back in the days. With The Who and all of those great bands I was with, we built all those speakers. And I used fiberglass. It was a very unique way of building a speaker cabinet that had, I go back a little bit, where my great mentor there was Paul Klipsch. And Paul taught me things that I never knew. Of course, he was the father of the folded horn, and really kind of started that whole hi-fi revolution. He and George Wright that we played a while ago, they had such great quality, the Klipsch horns, and he taught me how to do things. And we built front load, and at the same time had a rear reflex. We could only do that with fiberglass because we could shape it. We had our own fiberglass plant, and oh man, I don't know how many thousands of those, and there's still some of them out there. And one of them one of the models ended up in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We're the only manufacturer in the Rock Hall, and what a great honor. It's an incredible, humbling experience. We're right beside the room with Les Paul's life, and they have
smokes.
They have this speaker that I did the Quadrophenia, the 4-channel sound system for Pete Townsend, and a lot of other things there. But yeah, we built a lot of speakers in those days, and of course, we were one of the first companies to come up with monitors for bands, and we built a lot of different monitors. There again, Scott, because of my knowledge of phasing, I could do things that I don't know others could do it, but they didn't. And it was
I've always found monitors to be problematic for exactly that reason, because you've got these speakers basically pointed back at the performer, and the microphone sitting right there, and the chance for feedback is tremendous.
Yes, and in those days we had no rear rejection like the things we're doing today, so you had to suffer it. But we did it with the speakers. With the Grateful Dead, we actually used 2 microphones. If you pay attention to some of the early Grateful Dead pictures, you'll see 2 microphones on a stand. One of them fed the audio system for the monitors. The other one was the main system, and they were out of phase. Can't hear anything when they're out of phase. Nothing.
Right.
So
how about home theater speakers? I mean, you've done a lot with live sound. But anything in terms of hi-fi or home theater type speakers?
Yeah, well, I got off the road in 1980. I really got tired. I was out 15 years or so. And here's a guy that's never tasted beer or smoked a cigarette, and I'm running around with all these drug addicts, but that's okay. Townsend always put it cool. He said he's got a soldering iron, he makes us sound good, and he can drive the truck, which we did. But
you were the designated driver.
I was the designated driver and soldering iron holder. But,
right.
I got out in 1980, and I started playing around with satellite television, only again because of the ham radio. And we grew that business to be something just unbelievable. We did a lot of workshops. Different companies would hire me. I worked with Dolby for a number of years doing shows for them, explaining and demoing home theater systems. And this was back in the 80, 81 through about 91, I guess was the last but we were very involved in putting the picture and the sound together. And until I did that, it was all mostly people just listening to their satellite TV through their little speakers in the television. And I said, oh, no, we can do that better. So we started doing a lot of things, and it was really fun. Built theater rooms with real theater seats and curtains and motorized curtains, making the basement look like a cinema. And we built so many of those in those days. We would build the whole room. But there, I didn't build the speakers. I used a lot of JBL and THX stuff. Tomlinson Holman, who is one, of course, the guys that came up with the THX stuff for George Lucas. Tom and I were friends from way back. When he got out of college, he came to work for me to a very short time to help build the console for the Grateful Dead that now sits in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But, of course, Tom went on to do some great things. But I've been at Skywalker and helped him do some home theater teaching and so on in the early THX days. But I always used, tried to use great quality amplifiers. We'd usually use Crown, phase linear, and stuff like that. And, of course, JBL speakers. And not just the hi-fi speakers. We used the real deal, their Cinema series. Mm-hmm. And so I really love that kind of stuff.
Now, going on to a slightly different subject, A. Barron in the chat room is asking if you know of any good wearable mics, like lapel mics or over-the-ear mics that are unobtrusive. I guess you don't make those. No,
but I've been playing with some things, and I need to really start working more towards that because there's a great need for it, and
there is. I agree.
There really is, and I need to really get with the program on that. So who knows where we go from there? I've heard
of the company Countryman as making reasonably good ones. Have you ever tried those?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they are terrific. They are. They're the best at this point. Okay. And that's another thing, too. If I can't do it any better or different, why try to reinvent the wheel?
Good point. That's a very good point. Zealand in the chat room is asking, do you know what type of consumer or buyer consults you most today for microphones? Podcasters, TV productions, radio DJs, musicians?
All of above. I mean, we're doing all of this stuff. A lot of podcasters are finding out how inexpensive a really good setup can be. And now with our USB-Q and even the microphone I have here, it's amazing. This is our PR30. I was going to ask you, what's the difference between the 30 and the 40? Because it does have a different sonic character. Well, this is the PR31 BW, and this is the prototype that we came up with. Bob Workman, who is the front of the house engineer for Charlie Daniels. Charlie, he tossed out a 30-year run with Shure, and everything on that stage is Heil, everything. And Bob Workman came to me last year and he said, hey, what happens if I take a PR30 and I cut it in half? What's in the bottom of it? The PR30 has a similar to not the same, but something like this. He said, what's in that space? And I said, nothing. He said, well, can I cut that in half? And I said, let's do it. So he did. I did. And we got back on the phone a couple of hours later, and we had a new microphone. Doesn't sound any different than a PR30, but there was the space was nothing. It all happens here. And what happens is the element, this is a big diaphragm. This is 1.5 inches. It's huge. And as opposed to the 40. What's the diaphragm in the PR40? It's about 1.25 inches. Okay, so it's a little bit smaller. Yeah, but this we built to be able to put places in the underhead, under cymbals, and overhead if you want to do it. We also use them for guitar. They'll handle 150 dB SPL. We put them right up against the grill. We can set them back. They're great inside Steinway pianos, violins, cellos, flutes, horns. Stevie Wonder's Live at Last. If you go watch that DVD, you'll see his horns are on PR30s. It's just a marvelous little microphone. I love this microphone. And again, we're able to do things with it that you couldn't ever do with a condenser or a ribbon. And here it is. A front of the house engineer came up with the idea, so we listened intently. And when you buy it, it has a box that shows it's got the whole story on the back about Bob Workman, the guy's picture on it and all that. But they deserve that, and he's not the first one. We have several models that have come to fruition because I listened to these guys intently. Somebody in the chat room asked, and I can't find it at the moment. Aren't lav mics, these little lavalier mics, aren't most of those condensers? And how would you solve that problem with a dynamic? They're electrets. Oh, they're electrets. Okay, yeah, which is a type of condenser. Yeah, a type of condenser. And that's the problem. They need a ton of gain. And you need to build some type of preamp in it. And I don't know that can be done. But with some of the SMA components today, it could be possible. So we'll SMA? Yeah, these are small little surface mount assemblies. The transistor might be 1/2 inch tall. These things are, oh my gosh, they're like a 1/16 inch. And you have to use magnifying glasses to solder them. Very tiny, teeny. That's what's in your cell phones and the components on those boards. Yeah. Understood. Let's see. PC Guru is asking about the USB-Q and whether or not it can be adapted, or you're planning to make something like that for the iPad. I haven't really experimented with it much, but somebody told me the other day it works great on their iPad. So I got to.
Oh, okay. So if
they're using
the iPad has if it has a USB interface on it, then you should be able to use it.
Yep, that's what they're doing. I had again, one of my ham buddies said, "Yeah, this works great."
Lawn Dog is saying, Bob has my vote for making a set of home theater speakers. You should really do it.
Yeah, I hear you. I would love to do it again, but there again, you're going to recreate the wheel because there are so many great speakers out there today.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Strengths is asking, condenser or ribbon? He heard you say condenser or ribbon and wonders, what is a ribbon?
Well, a ribbon microphone is it actually is a ribbon that's about 3 or 4 inches long, and it's corrugated usually, and it's stretched in between two magnets, and when the air hits that, it causes that electric pulse from the magnet to be surfaced with the aluminum ribbon. And some of them now are not aluminum; they got other things. But it's a very interesting way to excite the electrons. My problem with them, they're too sensitive, and they just aren't quite as natural sounding as the proper dynamic. I didn't say every dynamic; I said the proper one. So there again, you have to listen and experiment, and you'll discover what I mean.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier in the chat room, I saw a question about this, and I was going to ask you also, those ear valves that someone gave you early on, the little aluminum tubes with a valve in them, are those still made? And who makes them?
I don't know. I wish I did, but I don't know that they are. I've never seen any of them. I did back in the 70s, but then when I got off the road, I didn't pay attention to that, and it got away from me. But I certainly would like to find them again for somebody that needs them. But there are other devices like that, probably using better technology today also.
Well, certainly the custom molded ones are, I think, the best because they're fit to your ears. But boy, I'm interested to find out more about those ear valves that you got, because that sounds very, very interesting to me. One of the things that you and I wanted to talk about, that you wanted to talk about, you told me about offline, was George Wright, the organist, who, along with Paul Klipsch, figured prominently, really, in the early days of hi-fi.
Yes. George was a great theater organist. He played at the Paramount in New York for years. He was also the organist on General Hospital.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he was an incredible organist, and it's where I learned a lot of my beginnings of this wonderful culture called theater organ, big Wurlitzers. And I was very honored that I was able to take a few lessons from him. And he's the guy that started it all on hi-fi records, these kind of things. And boy, it was really an incredible thing. Here's if you guys have never seen it, there's a
those of you who are only listening. Those of you who are only listening can. Yeah, it's not a Frisbee. Bob's showing us the record jacket and the actual black vinyl LP from Hi-Fi Records, and saying that it's not a Frisbee now. It's not a drink coaster for a giant beer stein. No, it's actually an audio recording. And George did some pretty amazing things with low frequencies in particular, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I sent some pictures. I wonder if John, well, I don't think it's John there today, but I wonder if they got those slides I sent them. There's a picture of a bunch of pipes I was standing in, and they might be able to bring them up if they got one of those. I'm always amazed that in the pipe organ world, a 32-foot pipe. Now, we're talking about a pipe that's about, sometimes about 1.5 foot square, wooden, 32 foot long. When you pump air through that thing and you got it tuned, it will produce 16 cycles.
Oh, 16. Man.
You can almost count them. And in the pipe organ world, They were the big bottom end that gave it the power that you always heard when you hear big pipe organs. But in the theater, they were even bigger because church organs run on about 5 or 6 inches of wind pressure. That means how much when the air comes into the pipe, it'll sustain 4 or 5 inches of wind. A theater organ will do 25 inches. It's huge.
Holy smokes.
Big time loud. And that's where I learned to listen as a 14-year-old kid. I was thrust into playing and voicing the Fox Theater organ here in St. Louis. And I played there for many years. Stan Can was my mentor, and I would substitute for him. But after the show was over, we had to tune and voice that thing many times. And that's where I learned to listen. Listening is a mental process. You have to really understand what you are hearing. And I learned that early on, not realizing that many, many decades later, it was going to be the entire basis of my career. Not the organ playing career, but building speakers, microphones, and all of that.
Right.
And George Wright, when he started putting these albums onto the market, you'd go into a hi-fi shop and they'd have a clipped horn in the corner that would produce 16 cycles fundamentally, not harmonically. And it was great. And then his Quiet Village was a song that came along in about 55, and you'd hear that on the radio because that was a really big deal. Hi-fi was a big happening in the mid 50s. Everybody was moving into this new sound, and 33 and a thirds were happening. That's 33 and a third RPM.
Right.
And
that newfangled invention.
That newfangled one. Here's one here, too. See if you can see the label. The label on this one is Holiday Inn, and the artist is none other than me.
Bob Heil on your own record.
Yes, I have a couple of those. There was the cover, Meet Me in St. Louis. And there was the pipe organ. That's the pipe organ I had in the Holiday Inn.
Oh, man.
And I built that setup, and then of course we came up with one for the Hammond organ, and that was done on the Holiday Inn label, HI label, but again at that pipe organ. But anyway, we experienced a lot of things in those days that even today keeps me going because it's the basis of what I do is listening and paying attention. But if you ever get a chance to look up George Wright in some of his early days, tremendous frequency response on those things, just great.
Weren't you gonna play us a little clip of George?
You want to hear a little clip of George? We can do that. Now,
sure.
This
a couple
organ.
Minutes.
Now we're going to do this on a mini disc. You know what? You know about mini disc, right?
Oh my God, I remember mini disc. It kind of went away.
I love mini disc. I love them. I'm sorry. I carry them around with me, and I know I could put them all in my...
For those who don't know, mini disc was an attempt to create a new recordable format. It's actually a digital recording format on I think it's a magnetic disc, right?
Yeah, it's looked like a CD in there, but a little bitty one. Let's see if...
But it's actually magnetic.
Yeah.
The Paramount Theater proudly presents its Wurlitzer organ.
Level okay?
George Wright.
Now, I don't think you'll be able to hear that 16 cycles, but it's there.
Now, can the mini disc record that 16 cycles?
Absolutely. I recorded this from the album. Oh, yeah. I have almost all my stuff on mini disc, believe it or not. But I'm slowly moving it over to my iPad.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But it's just one of those things that it's, again, why people still use ball microphones. It's habit. habit. And so I'm getting out of that habit and getting it into the new habit and all that kind of stuff, because I do have an iPad and I love it and all that kind of stuff. So what can I tell you?
By the way, Beatmaster and Joel H. in the chat room are correcting me that mini disc is actually magneto-optical. It uses both types of technology. Joel H. says that the optical was used for tracking, and the actual data was recorded magnetically. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's a little disc. It looks just like the CD hanging around in there, if you can see that. But
it's a little smaller than a CD.
There you can see that one because it's got a clear thingy on it.
Right, exactly. Those of you who are only listening, you can't see, but he's showing us a couple of little mini discs, which came out at the same time as DCC. Do you remember that?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Digital compact cassette. It looked exactly like regular cassettes that we used to all know and love in the 80s, but it recorded digitally. And I remember when I was an editor at Electronic Musician magazine years ago, we did a sort of a face-off between them. DCC actually performed a little better. They both compressed the audio pretty heavily. DCC performed a little better, but it's tape. It's not convenient at all. You can't do random access like you can on any kind of disc. So that's why mini disc was preferred, but neither of them really took off because CD recordable came in, and then MP3 and computers and MP3 players and so on.
The way it went.
So are you going to re-encode? Are you going to re-encode all your stuff? You recorded it all onto mini disc. Are you going to redo it from the LPs into a format that can be stored on your iPad?
Yeah, what you just heard came from that album, and eventually, I've got some of it already in there, so it just takes a lot of time. And
it does.
We'll get to it. Yep.
Here's a good question. Lawn Dog in the chat room has asked a good question. We've only got a few more minutes left. The subject of measurements and using test equipment. Now, you've been talking about how important it is and how you learned to listen in your early days and how important listening is. How do you balance that against actual testing using oscilloscopes or whatever test equipment you would use? I assume you do both.
Yeah, after you see it on a scope or a generator, and you see it today with a computer where we see the frequency responses and if there's any hills or valleys or whatever, that's all fine and good, and they need to be there. However, there's sometimes something. You can't describe it, but it doesn't sound right. There's just some little buzz or some little stringy here or there that doesn't sound right. And it doesn't show up anywhere. It doesn't sound right. And it's one of those things you have to go back and see. Is the diaphragm dragging on the side of the suspension? What is it? You never know. Maybe the magnet is a little off center, stuff like that. And it's just an anomaly that's hard to describe, but you know it when it's not right.
Yeah. Strengths in the chat room is asking, are you storing those files as lossy or as lossless digital audio? Now on the mini disc, it's lossy. There's no choice, right?
Right.
So when you put them into your iPad, are you gonna go lossless?
Probably so, because it wouldn't do any better. I mean, it's what it is. You're not going to bring any more back to it. So if I just preserve what's there,
you might as well exactly. You might as well not lose any more.
Right. Exactly. That's the way I looked at it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, this is fantastic. We could talk about so much more, I know, but we've come to the end of an hour, a fascinating hour, and I do hope you'll come back and join me again.
Anytime, call me. I love to be with you, and I love your audience, and hope you guys are keeping up with us on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Central, where we do Ham Nation. We get into a lot of crazy things, but really enjoy your show. I try to listen to it as much as I can during the day on Mondays, and
thank you.
We'll be back again. Yes.
I look forward to that very much. Be sure to tune in to Ham Nation right here on the TWiT network. You can tune in live on Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And then, of course, catch it afterwards on twit.tv or iTunes, any number of places. And there's always lots of very interesting information and discussion that goes on that show. So thanks again, Bob. Sure appreciate you being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Okay, thanks a lot. And greetings to everybody in the chat room, too. We'll talk to you soon.
You bet. Of course, my online home is hometheater.com, and you can email me at scott@twit.tv. Next week, my guest geek is scheduled to be Dave Duncan from Texas Instruments to talk about DLP technology in the cinema, mostly in the cinema, but of course that translates into the home as well. So I do hope you'll join me for that. Should be a fascinating discussion. Until then, geek out.